Hi, muckers. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Thank you so much, Kat, for coming back again. Hello, girl. How are we doing?
Thank you for having me back. It was so fun last time. I loved reading everybody's comments, so I'm so glad to be back.
If anyone doesn't know, we did, I think like a week or two ago, we did a deep dive into Jeffree Star's career, and it was so much fun. And we honestly were like, we don't know if people are going to watch it. Like, are people caring these days? And people really loved it. So we were trying to think in our heads, like, who next to do. And James Charles really kind of came to mind for me. And I said it to you, and you were like, yup, let's do it. Because James has had one of the most interesting kind of rise, fall, rise, fall, rise, fall trajectories in his career. Now, before we get into that, I do want to say that I accidentally linked your social medias and website wrong in the last episode and only found out like 12 hours ago. So at the start of this, just so we can let everyone know, where can they go to support you?
So if you go to spitfirenews.com, that is the way to get to my newsletter. And it's funny because YouTube automatically puts like HTTPS like colon like slash slash. Like they format it like a typical link. But my URL isn't actually that. It's just spitfirenews.com.
Okay, wonderful. And then you mainly use like Blue Sky as well, right?
Yes, which I know that like you never see people talking about James Charles on Blue Sky. You would never see someone talking about James Charles on Blue Sky. Like Blue Sky is very much so like the Twitter alternative that all of the very serious politics people went to, I feel. So, but Blue Sky is where I mainly post, and then also like Instagram.
Okay, love. So getting into the James of it all, you were very intertwined in the Jeffree lore. So just kind of as an overview to people, what has been your involvement with James kind of publicly? Like, what have you written about until this day? Kind of setting the scene, and then I'll say my involvement with him.
Yes. So I guess like where it starts with James for me is I feel like when everything went down with James in 2019, I was still in college, and so I was not yet a professional journalist, but I watched this go down like everybody else, and I watched like drama channel coverage of it, and I felt like Team James. So I initially actually liked and respected James Charles on a personal level. I was like, I had the eyeshadow palette. I enjoyed I enjoyed James Charles's content. And then when I became a journalist and started reporting on beauty YouTubers, I unfortunately, as along with the rest of the world, was exposed to these allegations that were coming out about him, these controversies. And so I began reporting on those. Like, I did articles that put together all of the different allegations against James Charles. I reached out to the people making the allegations. I interviewed them. I reached out to James for comment. I reached out to YouTube for comment, all these different places. And the most in-depth reporting I ultimately did on James Charles was involving his former creative director, Kelly, who came to me with allegations about James being just allegations of misconduct, which we can get into later.
Okay, and then my interactions with James, I have more than Jeffree, because with Jeffree, the most I had was, I made videos on him and he blocked me on social media, typical. But with James, what's really interesting is before I ever made videos on James Charles, because he was friends with Colleen Ballinger, when my original video came out in 2020, James actually went bat for Colleen on social media and was, responding to drama channels, responding to, viral tweets that were, opposing Colleen. And he was like, Adam's a liar, that boy's a liar, he was begging for lingerie, he's trying to ruin her credibility. So I was aware of James on a personal level back in 2020, and then I made my first drama commentary videos a year or two later, and one of my first ones was actually defending James Charles, and it's titled something like Defending James Charles Even Though He Hates Me or something like that. And I think then over the years of covering allegations and stuff like that, I've gotten blocked and blocked more on social media. So this is the first time with a creator that I actually do have a little bit of a personal involvement with as well, which is interesting. And also you do as well. But with James, I think we may as well kind of start at the beginning of his career. So he had a very, very, very quick rise. I think with people like Jeffree and Shane, they had gradual growth. But with James, he really exploded. And I think that kind of also tells a lot about his career moving forward. Whenever he would get involved in scandals, there was always the word of egotistical or arrogance with James, which, I mean, defending him here, I can't imagine going as viral as what he did as quickly as he did and not dealing with that. But if we take it back to the start, so we're dealing with around like 2016 time, I think, with the CoverGirl era. So first and foremost, what do you remember about that? And what was your take on James Charles becoming the first ever male CoverGirl?
James Charles came to me in a vision. Like, I do not remember. I don't explicitly remember the very first time I, like, saw James Charles in the same way that I do for other influencers. It was almost like one day he just was a meme. Like, I feel like the very early on James Charles stuff gained so much viral traction as a meme, and oftentimes it painted him in a bad light. Like, there would be memes that were kind of homophobic, some explicitly like homophobic memes about literally, and it would be a picture of him, and it would be like, this is the type of gay person who I don't like, as compared to like a quote unquote normal gay person. And that always struck me, like, it made me have sympathy for him, because I was like, he's so young at this point in time, like he does done nothing to like deserve
That's our friend.
this.
That's our friend.
And I, like, with him being the first male CoverGirl, it didn't strike me as, like, it wasn't, like, for me a huge, like, cause for celebration, but it wasn't a cause for, like, mockery or condemnation. Like, people condemned it because they, like, felt that it was, like, violating gender norms. And that doesn't bother me at all. But I will say, I think that, like, and this applies to the whole beauty community and the whole, like, beauty space. It is so commodified, it's so intertwined with, like, advertising and buying makeup products that it also never struck me as, like, it wasn't like a historic moment to me for the gay community. It was just like, CoverGirl has found a new audience to market itself to.
It was a historic moment to me. It was the equivalent of the second brick being thrown at Stonewall Cat. But I think what's really interesting about the CoverGirl moment and him becoming the first male CoverGirl was it really started to show a shift as to when the beauty community started changing towards, like, male-oriented creators. And we talked about this in the Jeffree episode, that, like, these male creators really came in and kind of made the new norm in the beauty community go from, you know, women on their webcams to men doing these, like, highly professional video and them being the personalities. But the reason he became the first male CoverGirl was because he went viral for a tweet, as we know, where the tweet was something along the lines of, I retook my yearbook photo, or I forced the photographer to retake my yearbook photo because I didn't like how I looked or I didn't like the lighting. I brought a ring light, and it was that photo of him that went viral. And it was with all of those tweets, the hate ones, whatever. And it's him, the highlighter is going crazy. He's doing this. He's, and, like, looking back, it's such a Facetune photo as well. So that was his first viral moment, and he was on Ellen, he was on whatever. Now, what's really setting a scene here was that he was ultimately exposed for that being a lie and that entire thing being fabricated. Now, I don't know about you, but to me, that really sets a tone for his entire career moving forward.
Yeah, I do think it definitely lends itself. And I think that the fact that that was found out, because I believe he told another beauty YouTuber who eventually, like, revealed this. So it's like, it strikes me as very James Charles, based on everything we know now, to be going up to other people in your field who are less successful than you, and to be like, I faked my claim to fame. Like, I'm like, it doesn't surprise me, because I feel like that is the type of person that James is. And I will also say that, like, I do think it is good. Like, I've spoken to people who are like, oh, James Charles helped make men more comfortable wearing makeup. And I'm sure some men and boys had that experience because of James Charles. And I think that is great. I've always defended men wearing makeup. And ever since I was a kid, it bothered me when people said they couldn't, or, like, wear nail polish or whatever. So I was happy for him at this time period. And even, you know, we're getting into some of the controversies, like annoying tweets, offensive tweets. Like, this stuff was starting to happen, and it did start to become a, like, well, he's very immature, was the vibe that I got from a lot of this stuff.
Well, what's really interesting was, well, we may as well get into the start of the controversies, because they started right around the time he went viral. I think James got away with it a lot at the start because he's young, he's new to the scene, and I mean, he was very young when this all, you know, blew up, and these, like, he was doing these first round of tweets that we'll get into. But I think that that narrative very quickly got overused with James. And whenever he's approaching and into his mid-20s, I think that's why the public backlash towards him really stains his reputation. But not to jump ahead. So James became the first CoverGirl ambassador at age 17. And this really propelled him, like you said, into mainstream because it was a debate. Like, oh my God, this is groundbreaking. However, right after this, you know, racist tweets were starting to be posted. I mean, one that really stands out that I wrote down was the one about visiting Africa and what was it, like catching Ebola or something like that. Like crazy tweets. What do you even remember what exactly that was again? It was something like, I don't want to go to Africa because I don't want to get Ebola or something like that. It was something so fucking jarring and something so crazy. And ultimately, he was obviously dragged across social media for it.
Yes, it said, I can't believe we're going to Africa today. OMG, what if we get Ebola? James, we're fine. We could have gotten it at Chipotle last year.
Crazy!
So crazy. So crazy. And something that's really crazy about that, too, is, like, there was this woman who got canceled on Twitter way back in 2015. Well, actually, this was around the same time. There was a woman in 2015 named Justine Sacco who lost her job over a tweet about AIDS in Africa. And it was a really viral story because she, like, tweeted it, went on a plane ride, and by the time she landed, it was, like, completely viral. And this was just a normal woman. Like, she was not a public figure at all.
Wow.
And it destroyed her life. And it's just so wild to me that you have James Charles, like, repeating this exact behavior. It just speaks to, like, I'm like, as a public figure, this was 2 years after that. How could you not learn from, like, the very easy PR casualties of, like, previous viral celebrities?
I think it says a lot about he didn't learn because he continued the pattern over the years. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Now, like I said, after he posted that, he was dragged over social media. I didn't know that about that woman, though. So this really shows a double standard that this was a moment where he also went viral because of it. And this is the start of James Charles gaining fame by going viral for problematic moments. Now, this was really the start of James Charles posting his first ever apology notes app. So this also then became a trolled formula of it seemed insincere and, you know, pulling up your notes app. And this was the first of many that he would do. And I think that this, in his first couple months of going viral with already a scandal, kind of showed early signs of like arrogance or just problematic stuff to come. And also, it didn't help that after James had done the Notes app and people started to quote-unquote move on, James started then getting back on Twitter and started subtweeting and shading other people in the beauty space community and used that same Twitter platform for kind of making jabs at other people. And again, showed early signs of being very competitive and arrogance and egotistical. Now, whenever I look back on those first couple of years, because I remember James blowing up, my perception of him was that he was incredibly, incredibly messy. But I kind of enjoyed the shady back and forth at the start because it was like that Jeffree Star formula. Obviously, he never grew out of it. But this is really 2016 that we're looking at before he ever got involved with like the Shane Dawsons and stuff like that. So in his kind of immediate start of his career, do you think that if those things hadn't happened, that he would have became the person that he did in terms of fame, like blowing up? Or do you think it was, what do you think?
Absolutely. I think that, like, he used controversy to build that into his growing public platform because for James Charles, like, he makes fun of old pictures of himself from this era because his makeup is not great.
Oh,
like,
those eyebrows, honey.
The eyebrows, famously big block eyebrows. And, like, he wasn't a bad artist by any means, but I think what's so interesting about the way that James Charles took off and became really, like, the breakout star of beauty YouTube during this time period is he lacked the skill and the qualifications and the history that so many of these other creators did.
Yeah.
Even Jeffree Star, I felt, was, like, he wasn't a makeup artist either, like, professionally, but Jeffree Star kind of had, like, artistry background to kind of like go into makeup, and obviously he launched his own makeup company, so he had that. Whereas James, his early days particularly, he was driven by being such a controversial figure, and I think a lot of this like shady back and forth meta drama is what propelled his career in the first place.
In the Jeffree episode, we talked about Jeffree, you know, this is us theorizing and assuming that there was an element of like jealousy that Jeffree had spent so many years and also, you know, working on tours and MySpace and all like this. And he is at the level that James was able to get to really quickly. Now, we're about to enter the era of 2017 where James is doing his first collabs with like Shane Dawson and people in the beauty space. Obviously, this is just theorizing because we don't know the exact moment. When do you think that Jeffree Star like became aware of James? And when do you think like he probably became someone that Jeffree would really have to be aware of? You know what I mean?
Yes, I imagine, because Jeffree, from what I've seen publicly play out, is pretty aware of like creators on the rise, and that makes a lot of sense because like any creator, he's spending a lot of time on these platforms, he's seeing what works, and so he's seeing what people are gaining success. And I imagine that Jeffree caught on to James very early on, and kind of probably from the get-go was like, this is a person who is almost like a younger version of myself.
Yeah.
And like the James controversies, as we talked about in the Jeffree episode, not really comparable at all to like what Jeffree was doing in terms of violence and later allegations. However, you do see some parallels, and you especially see the way that like James took the Jeffree drama conflict model over like what had traditionally been in this community, in this space. James, in the early days, did a lot of, here's how to do your eyebrows, which, like, come on. he did, like, here's how to, like, do your eyebrows, here's how to, like, do your eyeliner. He would make those types of videos, the types of things that had been classic beauty videos.
Yeah.
I remember a lot of classic beauty videos being like, here's how to do the Lady Gaga makeup, or here's how to do, like, your spring fling, your like prom, your like New Year's Eve makeup, stuff like that. That was really intended to be instructional. James and Jeffree both really leaned into like collabs with other huge YouTubers and stuff that was not really related to makeup, like the actual technical application. It was more like content designed to get as much attention as possible, even if it strayed from like the traditional beauty guru stuff.
Also, important to note that around this time as well, I was kind of seeing online that James was getting involved in like feuds in DMs that were getting exposed. He was getting called out by fans sometimes as well. And again, this narrative of James being an egotistical, arrogant influencer was really attached to him in these years. And then we have his collab era. He was now an untouchable rise in the community, and Shane Dawson took him under his wing. We're starting to see those collabs where James is involved in the first ever Jeffree Star Shane Dawson series. What reason is he there? Because he was popular and Shane and Jeffree wanted to use him. There was no reason for James Charles to be invited over to Jeffree's house in the Shane Dawson series to do Shane Dawson's makeup and drag. How dare you? How dare you imply that James Charles is good enough to do someone's fucking makeup? Piss me off. It was crazy, but we talked about this with Jeffree as well. Do you think that there was an element with kind of Shane and Jeffree and Tati who took James under their wing, and Tati said that, you know, she really wanted to mother James? Do you think kind of in all of them overview that there was an element of seeing someone young rise to the level that they were at and they genuinely wanted to take them under their wing in a caring way? Or do you think it truly was just like, you're gaining too quickly, I need you to be on my side, and I'm going to steal your audience?
There was so much. The dynamic between James and then Shane, Jeffree, Tati is so fascinating to me.
Yeah.
Just because, like, on a basic level, he's so much younger than all of them. And so that is so interesting to me because it's like he's like a decade younger than them.
He was like befriending them when he was like 17, 18, 19 years old, and they were like in their late 20s.
Right.
Dare I say.
Yes. And it's like, it's interesting because it's like you have that sort of like mentorship role. Like there's nothing inherently wrong with that, especially since they were in the same community. But what I find so fascinating is like Tati has James do her wedding makeup. Like
crazy, by the way. Like that does not get talked about enough.
It doesn't make any sense. Like he did, like it makes no sense to me, and it casts doubt to me on their true intentions, because it's like maybe like best case scenario, they truly wanted to mentor him as a creator, but it's weird to me that they like kind of almost like fed into this like delusion of grandeur about his like makeup skills.
That's such an interesting point.
Yeah, because it's like, and again, I do think James Charles is a good artist, and you've seen him actually grow a lot over the years in terms of like, he's not doing his eyebrows like that anymore. Like,
thank God.
His skills improved dramatically, and he talks about this. Like, I'm not even really dragging him. Like, he makes fun of his old early makeup looks. Like, he was such a young teenager. He had no formal training, and
clearly
these older adults were really like putting him on their level, because I think they were probably like, I think there was a lot of intense jealousy. Yeah. Like, he's so young and he's doing so well and he's already competing with us.
And
I
he's
think
untrained.
Mm-hmm. And you see this trickle out later, like these very clear feelings of jealousy and feeling that way. But it's also like they definitely wanted his audience. And you saw James does this too now. Like, when there's young rising talent, James like works with them as well. Like, generationally, there's this pattern.
Yeah. And we'll get into that specifically with the quarantine. Mm-hmm. But I think kind of diving into the Tati relationship a little bit more, I see a lot of parallels when I look at it in terms of like me and Colleen, because James was like 17, 18 years old, and Tati was, I don't know what age she is now. I think she's in her 40s. So she must have been in her late 20s, probably in her 30s, okay, whenever, you know, they were all being befriended.
Yeah, she's 43 now. So that means she was in her 30s.
Okay, so she was in her 30s. So again, literally, we're talking the same age James was what I was with Colleen. Tati was the same age. And there is a level to me there where I think I like Tati, but I do question her reasoning for taking James under her wing, doing the wedding makeup. There does seem like an element between Tati and Jeffree specifically as to like who could claim James the most and like who could love bomb him the most. And I certainly think that Tati did like the love bombing the most. That wedding day makeup is a insane thing to be doing. And the reason that I'm calling her out for that, and why I do believe that it was love bombing and manipulative, was because, not to skip ahead, we'll get to it, with Mbai's sister, she used the fact that James did her wedding makeup as a reason for us not to like him anymore. Like, I think that dynamic is really troublesome whenever it comes to James. And honestly, I do believe that people in their, you know, late 20s, 30s, mid 30s in the YouTube space were really, really, really using him. And obviously, taking my feelings about James aside and things that ultimately he would later get accused of doing, it makes me feel really sad, because I do believe that he was incredibly, incredibly blindsided, manipulated, and probably love bombed by these older creators. And speaking from my own experiences, it almost makes me feel like quite maternal towards like that younger version of James, because I can see myself in it. I really do see it as an issue, and it makes me look back on everything that happened as more so like, oh, Tati is shady as fuck, Jeffree is shady as fuck, like Shane is shady as fuck. But Tati specifically, I mean, giving yourself the role of a mentor, like you said, is fine and normal. And I don't think we should be villainizing people being friends with someone that are older than them, because there are things as mentors, and Tati was in the industry that James was in for longer. It makes sense. However, the element of her saying that she wanted to mother him, like, what do you think about that dynamic specifically?
I think that, like, as the relationship unfolded, and as we all know what was soon to happen, that to me cast it all in such a different light. Because if she had maintained a mentorship role and a mothering role, it's like weird, but like whatever. And, you know, you could have different readings of it, a more empathetic reading, a more cynical reading. But I just think that, like, it so clearly turned out to be the case that these much older YouTubers who had much more experience, much more life experience and internet experience, they weaponized that against him and truly sought to, like, destroy him in a way that, like, shows they never had good intentions to start with. Because how do you go from calling someone your, like, son to being like, I'm gonna like, I'm going to ruin your reputation because you slighted me.
Yeah. And so, again, this 2017, 2018, James is collabing with Shane. And like I said in the previous episode, you know, James got to the amount of subscribers that Shane had within a couple years. And so obviously Shane was promoting and taking him under his wing. And then it seemed that James had almost then got another level of, like, he deemed himself protected by these bigger influencers, because in 2017, 2018 was peak James Charles subtweeting, calling people out, Snapchat wars, Instagram wars, and it was always, or more so than not, James started to target smaller creators and smaller makeup artists. And there are a lot of instances from this time where James is blasting smaller makeup artists for allegedly copying his makeup looks, and then his fans would attack. And it did seem that James was kind of looking at himself in like an unstoppable way. And in a way, at that time, he was, but it seemed that he kind of became the person that people would target and make fun of and call out. To less than 2 years later, he was doing that to other people. And I think that it was showing signs of issues very, very, very early on. But again, I kind of want your thoughts on this. Mm-hmm. Like, trying to be as sympathetic as possible. If someone is already a little bit maybe narcissistic and they blow up and their entire like ego is filled and they're now rich and they're famous and they're whatever.
Yes.
I can only assume how that will impact you. I can't even imagine. I'm not excusing it, but like, how much of that do you think lend into the time that he went from being the smaller creator, being bullied, to bullying the smaller creators, in my opinion?
Yes. I mean, I just think it's so clear that, like, what he experienced as a teenager is so abnormal and so, like, definition of, like, maladjusted, because it's like, even though on paper it all sounds great, you're getting millions and millions and millions of dollars, you're getting global recognition, people are telling you that you're a trendsetter, that you're breaking all these boundaries, and you're just skyrocketing in terms of, like, online fandom. All of that looks good on paper, but I think that it has clearly such like a negative psychological effect on an adolescent who does not even really have themselves figured out yet. Because when it happens to someone who's a teenager, like teenagers famously, like, you are in the stage of your brain developing where you are learning like who you are and what your values are. And typically teenagers face a lot of consequences for behavior that helps them like grow into mature, responsible adults. But when James all of a sudden becomes the family breadwinner and he has money and outside the realm of like what anyone else his age would view as possible, and he has all of these people like looking up to him and like feeding into this, I absolutely think it went to his head. And it contributed to a lot of like behavior that unfortunately, like, it targeted smaller creators, which was unfair, and he was burning bridges within the industry because of the like incessant like drama and subtweeting. He would like subtweet. I remember his back and forth with Marlena Stell of Makeup Geek. That, like, I think that is really striking, because it's just like, as we would see these things that unfairly happened to James, he wouldn't have a lot of sympathy from these people, because it's like he would instigate or like escalate these personal beefs.
Yeah, it honestly is crazy. I completely forgot about that whenever you had brought that up. Yeah, again, early signs of this going on. And then we have, I would say around 2018 was probably James, I don't even think it's debatable. I think that was his career peak. We had him launching the Morphe x James Charles Unleash Your Inner Artist palette. And to say that this was a success is an understatement. And you know that Jeffree was fucking fuming. He was promoting it. He was whatever. You know that he was fucking fuming. And he has every right to be, by the way, because he worked hard on Jeffree Star Cosmetics. And Morphe x James Charles was genuinely probably one of the biggest makeup successes that I can honestly ever think of. Like,
absolutely.
Did you ever have it, by the way?
Yes, I did. And I was like desperate to get my hands on it. And I think that palette, regardless of its quality, like, Morphe, I think, is kind of like mid-tier.
Not regardless of its quality.
Regardless of that, it was pretty affordable for what it was. massive palette, tons of shades, and I think it was $39, which is on the more affordable end for especially like buzzy makeup, buzzy eyeshadow palettes. And what I loved about it is it had all the colors. So it was like, I mean, that was the whole gag, was like you can make a rainbow look. And I got that palette and I was making those rainbow looks. It was
I know you had blocky eyebrows as well, girl.
I absolutely did. It was my senior year of college, and I took that makeup palette with me on like spring break, spring breakers, and I was doing my little rainbow makeup.
I know you were cooking up some crazy looks. Now, I think as well, one thing that's really interesting, and I've actually talked to a couple people about this before. I remember actually being out in WeHo with another creator, and we were talking about this. I think that Jeffree probably really hated that palette for multiple reasons. But like you said, you just reminded me, James was advertising this palette as, you will never need to buy another palette ever again. And literally, Jeffree must have wanted to kill him like a yak in that moment. Because literally, what you just said, it had every color and it was affordable. So, affordable in the grand scheme of things. So, when you buy this palette, James was literally saying, save your money, buy this palette, and you're good. Jeffree was probably like...
And that also, like, I gotta hand it to him. Like, James marketed that palette so well, and it was such a moment. And I also think with Jeffree, like, Jeffree's palettes, I've never owned one, but at this period of my life, I desperately wanted to own a Jeffree Star palette. They were really expensive, though, and I was always like, well, when am I gonna use this? Because Jeffree's palettes are, like, blood red, sickening green.
Well, here's what I'm going to say as well, on that point as well. James appealed to the child audience, and he appealed to the older audience, whereas are you going to get a 12, 11, 10-year-old James Charles fan to be like, Mommy, can I have the orgy palette?
Literally, I think Jeffree came up online in an era where being incredibly edgy and provocative and politically incorrect helped you succeed. Famously, the like Nazi references in his MySpace days. So that was what actually propelled Jeffree's success, and you saw that aesthetic carry over into his makeup. It's designed to be shocking. It's designed to be crude. With James, he came up online in an era where being brand friendly was the most important thing you could do for success. So James did market himself to a young audience. He marketed himself as incredibly family friendly, so innocent. I remember when he turned 21 and he made a video that was like, I've never drunk alcohol
get drunk
before.
with me.
And like stuff like that, it just like, I'm sure Jeffree was also just like, okay, so my past can be used against me. James is messy, but he's so good for brands and advertisers.
Yeah. And I think as well, this was incredibly intentional from James, because James's peak was when YouTube adpocalypse was happening.
Yes.
So the only way to make money on YouTube was if you were incredibly brand safe. And I don't have any proof on this, but I can only assume that people like Jeffree Star, who were pulling out guns and fucking weapons in videos and smoking weed on camera, were probably not making a lot of money on YouTube. Who was? James. Because he appealed to every market. And I think that the Morphe palette as well was such a moment. I never had it because I never wore makeup like that. But it was a moment because Morphe were genius for it. And it was obviously inevitably their downfall, relying so heavily on influencers. Yeah. But when people thought of Morphe back in the day, they really thought of James, because James's full bit was saying code James for 10% off in every video. And he was known as being like a Morphe ambassador. He would promote different brushes before he ever worked with them. So when he worked with Morphe, it was like, oh, this makes perfect sense. And obviously, like we know, it was a huge, huge, huge success. Now, there was backlash with the palette, to be expected, obviously, but it was quite minuscule in the grand scheme of things. And now the reason I'm bringing this up was because it was actually started by my good friend Cody Tyler.
Wait,
you remember this?
Yes,
that was my first time I ever knew of Cody.
Oh my gosh! But you have to. I can't remember exactly what her complaint was.
That was not the first time I knew Cody. I knew Cody from the Colleen fandom as being a a crazy individual. Like we
Right.
knew Cody because I was deep in the Colleen fandom during this time. And we would actively be terrified of Cody, like that, which is why it's so funny, like Cody being so intertwined in my life in the years past that.
Yeah.
But when Cody made that video, we were all like, this is the craziest video we've ever seen. But we didn't bat an eyelid at it because we were so used to Cody being over the top. Cody filmed this video on like the square feature on like your phone, and it was like the worst quality video ever. And Cody is like screaming at the camera that the red shade has stained their eye. And Cody's like, James, how dare you? How dare you? This is, wait, actually, I wonder if I could like find it really quickly to hear exactly what they say. But oh my God, I can't believe that was like, you were aware of Cody Tyler back then as well, because we all were. This turned into a huge viral moment. Oh, as I expected, this video has been scrubbed from the internet. Obviously, Cody has deleted it, but what a moment. What a moment. We always will remember it. But anyways, Cody made that video and it really did blow up. Now, it mainly blew up and didn't have a lot of credibility because Cody was a little bit unhinged in the video. But James responded to it and was so snarky and shut it down quickly and was like, what do you fucking expect? You're using a color red. But also, I'm pretty sure the dyes in the palette were like,
it's interesting because it's like,
they were using Rad 40 in that shit probably.
It's kind of interesting because it's like, when I've used those types of makeup shades in the past, it does stain, but it's also like, you could totally argue that like it is a quality factor with the makeup if it stains. And I think James made the argument, and maybe this is true, that it's impossible to make the reddest red ever. I feel like it doesn't stain your eyelid. Maybe that's totally true, but it is like, it's a valid complaint, especially if you don't know that coming in. You're like, why are my eyelids stained? That's concerning. It's also interesting because at this period in his career, like you said, it's his peak. And it's his peak as exhibited by the Morphe palette. And it's also his peak because it's like, he has the videos with Emma Chamberlain. He has the videos with the Dolan twins.
Squad, yes.
The Sister Squad was a cinematic universe for YouTube fans. Like, I remember me and my college roommate at the time, like, we watched it like it was the Avengers. Like
it was
an event. It was a cinematic event. And so Sister Squad was so huge. And I do think that, like, James had reached a point of oversaturation where it doesn't surprise me that the Cody Tyler video took off, because I think anything that seemed like a legitimate criticism of him, a reason for people to hate him. You see this time and time again. Like, people reach this, like, unimaginable level of success, and people resent them for it, whether that's right or wrong. And so they just are looking for a reason to take that person down.
Sister Squad is really interesting because that was going to be my next point, because that was something that really gave James a huge momentum and boost on YouTube, but ultimately ended in disaster. So if people do not know, Sister Squad was a genius fucking concept, either set up by management or organically happened. Which one do you think it was, by the way?
That's a great question. I feel like I lean toward organic, but just like everyone saw how they could easily take advantage of it.
So if people don't know, the Sister Squad was James Charles, who had the makeup and, I guess, drama audience, Emma Chamberlain, who was at this stage just starting to really, really, really blow up and doing like daily vlogs, and the Dolan twins, who were probably, I would argue, the biggest force in it at the start. And it was all of their audiences coming together with these collab videos they would do. And people really loved the Sister Squad because it was all these creators coming together, but they also loved the Sister Squad because there was additional lore. Ethan and Emma were dating, allegedly, and James would openly flirt with Grayson Dolan, and the entire bit would be Grayson is straight and James Charles wants to sleep with him or be with him. No, this is obviously something that was in the ending of the Sister Squad brought up a lot and did James make Grayson uncomfortable. But what I've written down about Sister Squad was it was the first instance of the narrative being that James Charles is interested in straight men or men that aren't interested in him in general. So this is the first of many moments that the public will be looking at James in this way. So what do you think the immediate response to kind of that would have been in terms of like James openly flirting with Grayson, because I remember people loving it. I remember
Yeah.
people thinking it was funny, but then when do you think it went from people being like, this is funny, haha, to James is doing this with other people? It seems to be a pattern. Is it a joke? Is it going too far? Like, what's your take on that?
It is such a complex and interesting thing to like think about, because I do think that on the surface, if we just go off of the videos alone, it is very clearly oftentimes staged or scripted. So
Yeah.
therefore, like, everyone is agreed to doing it. Everyone thinks it's funny. Everyone is uploading it publicly as a joke. And the audience
standing by it.
Yes, and the audience is loving it. So if you just look at the surface facts alone based off of the videos, absolutely above board, no issue. I do think that like it there's a little bit of a red flag for me in that like the joke ultimately is like James is gay. Is like that's like ultimately the joke. And James is obviously fine with being the butt of the joke. However, I think that it almost opens the door to people making this next step, which is like the joke is that he's predatory. What if he's actually predatory, and like relying on sort of this stigma around like gay men. But then things get 100 times more complicated, because then people start to come out, including like other influencers, including like random people. Obviously, we're going straight into that era, but it's like from the get-go, you had like some influencers, at least one male influencer, saying like James Charles actually made me uncomfortable. And that is also where it gets such a gray area, because a lot of times these things supposedly happened privately. So we don't know. Like we don't have the full context. We just have to kind of like go off of like the fact that obviously you believe the people who come forward, but it's also interesting to think about like, does that play into the staged scripted version of James?
Yeah. That's a good point. And before we enter Dramageddon, which is 2019, there's one drama that we're missing. And I want to talk about it because I wonder if you remember it. Now, this blew the fuck up in the moment and is probably one of the scandals that still to this day follows James in a way where, like, Stan Twitter will always bring this up. Do you remember his one-sided beef with Ariana Grande? Do you remember this?
Yes.
This was, if people don't know, James had attended an Ariana Grande concert. He posted about it, and Ariana followed him after it. Obviously, he was a huge influencer, and Ariana was following him because he was a huge influencer. There's not much more to it. So James then started to flood Ariana's comments, I guess DMs, and Ariana ended up unfollowing James after her fans found out that Ariana followed James and started tweeting her. And this was, as someone who would often get, you know, I was followed by Ariana. She would like my tweets. She responded to me like once or twice. Like I like finna be in the pit of the Ariana Grande Twitter. So I know exactly that Ariana Grande was the most online celebrity at that time and was very, very, very easy to get in contact with in the grand scheme of things. She was always talking to fans. Point blank period. I think I have like 3 tweets where she tweeted me. But anyways, people immediately started spam tweeting her like, you need to unfollow James, like we can't have you doing this. And she did. She immediately unfollowed James after all that. And James started getting so fucking angry about this. And then a couple months later, or however long it was, he was doing a video with Shane and Ryland, and they asked who the rudest celebrity he ever met was. He goes on a tangent that Ariana was the rudest celebrity, and ultimately it boiled down to the fact that she unfollowed him because her fans were like, he's racist, he's problematic. Now, what's even funnier is James admitted that even though he's calling her the rudest celebrity and the worst person ever, he admits that Ariana literally messaged him and was like, hey, my babies are telling me that you are like this, and I just don't stand by that, so I'm going to have to unfollow you. Do you think that that showed James's relationship with, like, the mainstream people a little bit? Because that, to me, is crazy that he was openly expecting Ariana Grande to just take his side in something.
Absolutely. That it's so ludicrous, and it's just like, it's a classic sign of kind of egotism and also just immaturity and not being smart, because it's like, if that happened to me, I'd probably cry myself to sleep. I'd be like, Ariana Grande hates me personally, oh my god. Like, I understand where his like emotions are coming from, but I'm like, in what world do you think that you possess the platform to go up against Ariana Grande and think that, like, people are going to be okay with that? It's just so stupid of a PR move. He should have just said nothing.
Yeah.
And just moved
also,
on.
He tweeted something. I think I put it on my Finsta a couple days ago. I completely forgot about this tweet. I don't know if I'm going to be able to find it really quickly, but he tweeted something. Oh, here it is. He tweeted, imagine me and this was one of the tweets that then the fans realized that he was talking to Ariana and got her to unfollow. He tweeted and said, this just goes to show his delusions. Imagine me and Ariana Grande in a video glamming, talking about her new album, everything amazing going on in her life, and ending our drama. Sounds really iconic if you ask me.
It's
your
so
drama with Ariana Grande?
That tweet is beyond deranged. Like, what would compel you to, like, openly fantasize about Ariana Grande, like, ending this, like, beef? It's so crazy. And lest we forget, he then goes on to make, like, covers of himself singing Ariana Grande songs.
You believe God!
Poorly singing Ariana Grande songs. That was a time when I remember, like, specifically him making the You'll Believe God Is a Woman. I wanted so badly to be, like, able to defend James Charles from, like, all of the unfair hate that he got. And I was just like, this is indefensible. Why would you ever think this is a good idea?
That video was so funny whenever all the different harmonies of him come in as well, like delayed, by the way. Oh my God. Okay, so obviously we've hit the moment that we all are aware of, and because it is such a talked about thing, we don't need to deep dive into it that deep. However, as we know, By Sister happened. Mm-hmm. Now, with the Jeffree one, we talked a lot about what happened and the context and stuff. So with this, let's kind of focus on different things. The first question I want to ask you is, if By Sister didn't happen, do you think that James's career would be where it is right now? Do you think he would be in a different place? Like, if he was not momentarily stopped, and keep in mind, he had just passed Shane Dawson in subscribers the weekend that this happened, do you think that his career would be bigger, the same, smaller, or what do you think if By Sister never happened?
I think, and I actually, when I was at Business Insider, one of my coworkers and I did this project where we measured, like, did controversies ultimately make YouTubers more successful? And James was one of the people who we looked at, and it's like, obviously, he took the biggest hit that anyone had ever taken in, like, a one-day period. He lost
3 million subscribers in under a week, which was the fastest YouTube subscriber drop ever.
Yes. So that is, like, an unimaginable hit that he took in that moment. But the way that he rebounded was so intense. I mean, at some point he got up to, I'm pretty sure, 25 million subscribers, which is, like, really significant. And I think that By Sister ultimately propelled him to a height that he would not have otherwise reached.
Fair. I don't know. I look at it really interesting because, I mean, before By Sister was happening, he was at about 21 million subscribers, if I'm not mistaken, and was surpassing Shane Dawson, that I'm like, would he have kept up the momentum without it? I don't know. I do agree with you. His response, No More Lies, which is one of the greatest responses ever, where it is receipt-based, debunked Tati, and made her really look like she had ulterior motives. I think that gave him such a level of credibility, and also people love drama. This went so big that obviously he was someone to defend. And also, for the people that didn't like him in the past, there was kind of like a, you won me back. But also, there's some other things to kind of note. The immediate fallout, like I said, was losing 3 million subscribers in under a week. Fastest subscriber drop in YouTube history. There was a thing called sub counter where you could actively watch the subs that you were gaining in real time or that YouTubers were. This ended up getting shut down because people were literally making so much money off of doing live streams of James's sub count, losing hundreds of thousands at once. James Charles's over party was trending worldwide. Also, celebrities and influencers really piled in as well. Obviously, we know Jeffree dived in and said that, you know, he started attacking James's brother. He said that James is a danger to society and banned from his house. Shawn Mendes fans were canceling James because they found that James had been commenting flirty things under Shawn Mendes' photos, and this fit the narrative. And also, Zara Larsson It's the midnight sun. Like, she does no wrong in my books. I don't even care that she did that. She is a performer. Done. I love Zara Larsson. But she had accused James of, like, DMing and flirting her boyfriend. No, again, I cannot defend her with that one. The fact that Zara Larsson jumped on a YouTube bandwagon hate thing, like, what are we doing, Zara?
It's so outrageous. And this is
Ended up apologizing, by the way.
Yes, and this is particularly where it's like, when I talk about, like, the complexity within James Charles' allegations, it's like stuff that came later to me based on what came out publicly, based on reporting that I did. Like, I am fully convinced, and James Charles has admitted to behaviors that like cross lines, that constitute forms of misconduct. So there's no questioning some of that later stuff. But this period, and this is when you have other influencers coming forward, this is when you have random people coming forward saying things that aren't even really allegations, but it's all grouped in.
Yeah.
This is where it gets really tricky to, like, kind of piece apart, like, what is actual harmful behavior and what is people jumping on a hate bandwagon and, like, seeing it as an opportunity to go viral. And I remember, like, BuzzFeed did an article that was literally just like 30 of the best James Charles takedowns, and, like, they were mixing all of this stuff in together. No one was reaching out to James for comment or, like, verifying any of this stuff. There wasn't, like, a lot of real journalism happening at this time period. That was something that really struck me. I remember also, like, again, I was in college at the time, and it frustrated me deeply, and it actually contributed to why I wanted to be an internet culture reporter, is the fact that this was, like, global news. It was, like, leading CNN.com, but no one was doing any real journalism. Yeah. So I was just like, so what is the truth? Because all of these things varying from he DM'd this guy who's now my boyfriend to, like, he did something coercive to me in person. All of this is, like, kind of being mixed together. And I just felt that, like, that speaks to why bandwagon hate, even when someone has done something that's actually wrong, everything gets distorted. Yeah.
Well, also, it's important to note that during this time as well, like what you're referencing with, like, Sam the waiter, it was Jeffree Star posting on behalf of people. He was like, I've just talked to Sam. Just you wait. We're all going to go together. But one thing that I do have to say that is always incredibly, incredibly troubling to me when it comes to Bye Sister, and it's very unfortunate as well, because I would love to be able to look at Bye Sister, James's response, and put a closed chapter, but the behavior that he ended up admitting to in parts, which we'll get to, really just... But with Bye Sister, if we kind of look at it as that was the only thing that James ever accused of, it makes me really... It's very troubling to me, because the video was posted when James Charles was in Australia, merely hours away from doing one of the biggest meet and greets ever. That, to me, with the age that he was as well, I think he was like 19, from someone who went on tour and knows the pressures anyway, is so fucking disgusting that these 30-year-olds put him in that position. And for Tati Westbrook to have the fucking audacity to be like, I'm doing this video to look out for you. I'm making this video before someone else is making it. Girl, you're the only one making it. And he literally... And traveling alone as well, being on the high floor, which they genuinely reference that Shane's like, he's a narcissist, he won't jump. Like, what are we doing? Like, that to me, I don't think people talk about enough. And obviously, because he ended up doing other things as well, it gets whatever. But it's so fucking disgusting to me. Like, fuck all these adults in the situation.
100%. No, I always think to myself, when I get to the age that Tati Westbrook and Jeffree Star and Shane Dawson were at when this happened, I already can't imagine doing this to somebody. It is so, like, for them at their, like, in their 30s to be acting this way, to me it's so reprehensible. And no matter what James Charles did, this was not the correct way in any world to handle either sensitive issues or to broadcast petty issues, because Tati conflated alleged predatory behavior with, like, shady friend backstabbing behavior, and she actually made the, like, backstabbing behavior out to be more important than, like, the alleged predatory behavior. So it's like, that is so inappropriate. And even as all of this was unfolding, I was really sketched out by how these adults were behaving. And Jeffree in particular, it's like, he's already has this whole track record of doing this, where he instigates conflict, he manipulates the audience, he manipulates whether or not he has receipts. So it's like just totally shady all around.
Yeah, it's very, very, very troubling. So obviously James responded, public were so much on his side, and then all the people that tried to do all this to him really suffered in consequences. The public pendulum swung back on his side. So we'll move forward to a year later, which was 2020, and it's important to note that after Bye Sister and No More Lies, James was, again, like you said, rapidly growing and incredibly profiting from it. It's not to say that he should have gone through it, though. So now we're in 2020, and this is like quarantine era. This is when TikTok was blowing up. It had been rebranding. And James purposely started collaborating with people from the Hype House. Now, this is what you saying, him purposely befriending these people and stuff like that. Now, he was befriending people from the Hype House, which was really interesting because they were all literally in their teenage years. And we started to see the narrative of James Charles being too old to hang out with teens start to circulate. He then was blowing up on TikTok based on collaborations and, you know, their young audiences. And his audience shifted so young in those years. I would say that his audience, from my understanding, after Bye Sister, were probably late teens to young adults, and also probably older people that wanted to like mother him and baby him and protect him. During COVID, he really, really, really relied on the under 21, under 18 audience that like Charli D'Amelio had, Addison Rae had. And again, I can't stress enough, he was getting backlash for hanging around teens while he was in his 20s during this, you know, age, because he was benefiting off of them as well. Why do you think he made that jump necessarily? Because he was doing good on YouTube.
I think that it's interesting because, like, when I eventually did my article with his creative director, which we'll get to, I found out some kind of interesting things about this time period. However, I think that on a very basic level, one thing that James is really good at is he knows where the trends are going to be headed.
Yeah.
So, like, I think he understood that TikTok was the new frontier and that he needed to establish himself, and that the easiest and best way to do that is to collab with the people who are literally the biggest people on the platform. So Charli D'Amelio and Addison Rae. And I remember, like, when they were getting this backlash, like, Charli, who was at the time, like, I don't know, 15, 16.
She was young.
And I remember her saying, like, James and I's friendship is built on the fact that we both went through this at the age that I am now, which is totally true. Totally true and fair. I do think it's very telling that they're not close anymore. Like, this was a very, like, brief period of their lives. I also, a fact that I love to bring up at parties is, because it shocks and disturbs people. Addison Rae, none of her music videos, or, like, any of the videos she's made as an artist, have come even close to the viewership of her video with James Charles on YouTube.
Is that true?
Yes.
My God.
The video of James Charles doing Addison Rae's makeup has, like, astronomically more views than any of her, like, adult, mature, solo projects have.
You know what's so funny to me is Addison Rae's currently on her tour, and she just did, like, Dublin and Manchester and London. Like, all my friends went. And there's something to me that whenever I see Addison Rae now, I look at people from that era and what they're doing. Addison Rae's, you know, music career and all the rest, and is getting buzzed for Best New Artist at the Grammys. Charli D'Amelio is still killing it in different ways. Alex Warren from the Hype House is, like, literally nominated for, like, huge awards. And then I look at James as being a stagnant creator, which is really interesting because I always thought that he was an innovative person. Now, you had brought up the article that you had made, and you said, we'll get to it. So we may as well get to it now. So I actually, don't hate me, I don't remember this. So what exactly happened?
Well, so interestingly enough, this was a point of frustration for me when I worked at Business Insider. And I've talked about this before in, like, other venues. Basically, like, after the success of the David Dobrik story in March 2021, that story from the outset was put behind a paywall. And I was so upset and, like, heartbroken.
Can fact check that.
Yeah, like, I literally cried on the phone, like, with the editors making the decisions, like, begging them to not put it behind a paywall. But they did. And they started putting pretty much all my work behind a paywall because that one had been so successful. So the James Charles story that I worked on went behind a paywall, and that definitely affected the reach of the story. But basically, this woman who had worked as his creative director in like at the peak of his YouTube career, they were involved in this like employment lawsuit. And wildly enough, like she kind of violated the terms that she was under to like speak to the press, but it all worked out for her in the end. But she came to me with like allegations of like bad behavior, and she also told me a story that I thought was really interesting, which like this is her perspective. I think James Charles like would counter this with his own perspective, but the way she described it to me is like people around him were very instrumental in his success in 2018. Like, he was not the only person involved in, like, coming up with the video topics, like, editing the videos, like, doing the styling for all the videos, like, things like that that really contributed to the success of that era. But, like, she left at around that time period, and also she was like, oh, James made me and others uncomfortable. Like the thing that went most viral from that article is she shared these text messages where James asked for someone to help him shave his butt for Coachella.
I remember this. I remember it now.
Yes, that was from that article. She also, and James vehemently denies
Crazy,
this.
by the way. Crazy, by the way.
That's in a text message. She, like, this was in the article, but James vehemently denies that she accused him of saying the N-word in private.
I remember that, yeah.
And that was really wild to me, that claim had been made. But he denied, like, the vast majority of what was in that article, and that was kind of that. But I do think that, like, it rings true to me, because you see this. Like, he never really got back to that peak of YouTube videos again, and his YouTube videos were never as, like, in my opinion, like, as creative as they were during that time period. Because I used to look forward to watching James Charles videos. Like, when James Charles had a new video, I was like, this is gonna be good. And today, obviously, I don't watch them for other reasons, but even in the TikTok era, when I still liked James, or at least gave him the benefit of the doubt, the content became less interesting to me.
It's interesting to think that there was creative directors involved in it as well, because he really does credit himself on being, you know, the artist and the creative behind it. No, there's, one thing I really quickly want to touch on that I forgot, which is that YouTube gave James his own show, Instant Influencer.
Yes.
Now, Instant Influencer is really interesting to me because it shows a rise and fall of James's career, because he got his own show. He basically was doing a RuPaul Drag Race version of being an influencer, but it aged terribly because, first of all, none of the people on the show ended up really being able to keep up with it because they were dropped after the show, except for like Indigo, who still kills it on social media from my reference, but because they were a quick show and then, you know, got dropped. But James had an episode, I think it was episode 3, where the challenge was create a fake apology video. Like, pretend that you are winning people back, cry, pretend that you care. And he was actively saying all this that ultimately came up against him in years later, where it's like, how can we trust that you are giving a genuine apology video when you're instructing these people how to manipulate the audience? And also, this shows the rise and fall of James's career because YouTube ended up dropping him from his own show during all the scandals. Did you watch that show, by the way? I low-key ended up in the moment.
Oh, 100%. I made my mom watch it with me. I made my mom watch that show with me, and she was like, why are we watching this? This is terrible. But then she got a little invested. But, like, the apology episode, it is so, like, crazy looking back on that. Because it's like, at some point, James had already made apologies that were supposed to be serious.
Yeah.
Like, racist tweets.
Yeah.
But, or, like, one racist tweet. But, like, James had already made apologies that were supposed to be serious, and he would go on to make apologies that were supposed to be serious. So, again, this just speaks to, like, a lack of... He is both so savvy and so not savvy. Because I'm like, why wouldn't you think to yourself, me mocking apology videos could come back to bite me in the future?
But I'm also like, who's on his team? And are people, like, sabotaging him? Or is he... I think, are people sabotaging James? But then I also think at the same time, is he so kind of like egotistical from what I've gathered that it's kind of like his way, or where he's like, I know what I'm doing kind of vibe?
I think it's probably, he does seem to surround himself with a lot of yes men, as a lot of YouTubers of his stature do. Like, they have like the permanent like live-in friend group who like
Which is why his
them.
content sucks now, because, or allegedly, because it's probably his friends or the creative directors.
Right, yes. And I think that, like, you can literally see on camera in his interactions with these people, like, whenever you hear them chiming in, which granted, it's edited, so we don't really know, but I get the sense that, like, people don't want to say no to James.
Yeah.
And I think that is the case with any celebrity posse. Like, that's the power dynamic within a structure like that.
Also, I'm pretty sure Instant Influencer dropped in 2020, which was a year after Bye Sister. And keep in mind, James from Bye Sister, before he made No More Lies, made a video where he was crying to the camera, doing everything that he advised people to do in Instant Influencer. So just another thing to note. Now, obviously he was, you know, rebranding to more of like a TikTok creator. He was blowing up during this time. However, James moving his focus to TikTok really was the start of the end, because James would frequently hang out with TikTok boys that he would openly be kind of flirty with, that the viewers would pick up on. Yes. And some of these people would end up kind of speaking about this dynamic, but James would also be seen, you know, leaving flirty comments on his straight friends from like these houses who are doing these like content houses, like TikToks, calling them like daddy and and all like this, like people that he literally is like filming videos with, which was almost like replicating the Grayson Dolan, but felt incredibly invasive and almost like way too far. Like the audience no longer liked when he was flirting with a straight man like Grayson Dolan, because when he's doing it to like Noah Beck, like we now feel uncomfortable because you're also filming with his girlfriend. You know what I mean? Like there was no boundaries for him during this era. That's what's really troubling to me, by the way.
Yes. That raises two amazing points, one of which I vividly remember when James started doing the Grayson Dolan style jokes on TikTok, because I, as someone who, again, wanted to view James in the best light possible, I was like, this is a huge mistake. This will not end well. I was just like, have you learned nothing? Even if you are completely innocent, these YouTubers will throw you under the bus. And there are these TikTokers will like throw you under the bus, and they will use this as like evidence. So I was shocked that he would re-engage in that behavior. And I also think that like a really troubling aspect of it, which you just said, is it's not just that he is like flirting with these men who identify as straight, but he is like flirting with the boyfriends of his like female friends and collaborators, and this is another repeat behavior.
Who were all younger than him, by the way.
Yes, and you see that behavior like repeated over and over again, and that to me, like, there's a sexuality angle to it, obviously, but to me, I'm just like, this almost goes past like the stuff about you being gay. This is just very simply like, it is rude to publicly thirst after your friend's partner. Yeah.
It shows an element of disrespect, and again, circling back, arrogance, and like the rules don't apply to you. Now, this is around the time when James really starts getting hit with his first scandals of talking to, being interested in, following, DMing, Snapchatting. We're aware, like all these different terms of alleged underage people. This is when James really starts getting hit with these for the first time, I would say. Now, because James had been commenting these things under his like straight male friends' TikToks, people immediately started being like, the narrative was James likes straight men and young boys. Like that was the public's opinion of James during this time. And it was very hard for him to shake these allegations, because there were like alleged real ones coming through, then there were alleged fake ones, and then we were seeing people like Daft Noodles creating mega threads on any person that would speak up, with the majority of them later retracting and saying they were doing it for clout. But like you said with Bye Sister, no one was really analyzing or looking into the real stories versus the fake. So in a way, James also got off with a lot because he was able to plead ignorance to there's so many fake stories. when James first started getting hit with all this and his immediate response and the public perception from you being a fan of him and all like this, because for me, I was never a fan of James. That was the one creator I really didn't fuck with. What was your opinion of it?
I set out to report on and like kind of get to the bottom of what was happening with this. And I ran into a lot of issues. I was ultimately able to publish reporting where I like spoke to some of these teenage boys, as well as people who had made allegations against James during the time of Bi Sister. And through those interviews, I learned more details that sort of like brought further clarity to some of the more serious Bi Sister allegations, potentially giving some weight to some of those allegations that involved like in-person conduct. Yeah. And then I also heard from a lot of boys who talked about their experiences with James, and some of them, most of them, for the overwhelmingly, like my goal was to publish like a really definitive account of what had happened. Unfortunately, because they were so young, I would only be able to talk to them about it on the record if they had a parent or guardian's permission.
Obviously,
and a lot of these boys were closeted and not out to anyone. And so that presented one of the biggest hurdles I've like ever encountered reporting. And so I was only able to go off of like things that were publicly posted. And it left a massive impression on James's career. But I feel that Deaf Noodles in particular really like cleared a path for people to just say like, oh, it was all made up. It was all exaggerated. Because
and that's what James relied on, mind you, to get out of this.
Yes. Because, like, Deaf Noodles truly, like, at the time, he was fulfilling this role that a lot of journalists, including myself, benefited from, which was that he would basically just create a record of so much of what was going on.
Anything posted.
He would post anything. And sometimes that was really useful. Like, I remember during COVID, at the height of COVID, or, like, in early 2020, Deaf Noodles would catalog like Instagram stories of people partying, and so that was useful because it was like those Instagram stories would expire, but there was a record in the Deaf Noodles tweets, so you would see Deaf Noodles tweets embedded in all over the place in all different kinds of publications.
That's so true.
Then he later scrubbed everything, and all of that evidence was lost.
Oh my god, yeah. Did the articles just have like empty spaces now?
Yes.
No,
yes.
Dennis.
Yes. So a lot of that evidence is lost, which granted, like, as reporters, we really need to rely more on screenshots than embeds. Yeah. But, you know, a lot of people did it. I did it. Like, it's a mistake that's easy to make. And so that happened. And then also, when Dennis took on this James Charles narrative, he took it on in a way where he was like, I am now acting like I'm a fully fledged journalist and I'm exposing all these cases. And then he just put them all together. And some of them were just blatantly not true.
The problem was James Charles was arguably Dennis's most profitable and clickable information that he was posting. So he would get any crumb and he would post it and he would blow up. So Dennis didn't give a fuck about it and was doing it so he could get the biggest engagement. And obviously James came back a year later, 6 months later, whatever it was. And by the way, from the time that this started to the time James made his Holding Myself Accountable video, there were so many alleged victims of James Charles, and no one was able to verify it because Dennis was confusing all of us.
Yes.
Literally, Dennis would, I remember this so vividly. Dennis would post another fucking young boy comes forward, and someone would tag me being like, you got to make a video on this. And I'm like, wait, give it a moment. 20 minutes later, all the replies to Dennis are like, by the way, this person said in the comments that they're lying for clout. And then it's like, it's so frustrating. So anyways, James came back with a video Holding Myself Accountable, and it was a video where he basically threw Dennis, without naming him, under the bus as someone who was like destroying his credibility and was posting fake stories about him. So he relied on it all being fake, except he did acknowledge that two people he did lied about their age to him, and he did message them, but once he found out their age, he stopped. So he basically admitted to two of them. And then he said that he was what for love? Do you remember?
No, what did he say?
He was desperate for love. That was his moment. After admitting that he did do this to two boys, he said, I was desperate for love. Now, this became one of the most infamous moments in the last couple of years of YouTube. And to make matters worse, he deleted the video. He deleted the video where he admits that 2 of them were real, and that the reason that he does this and uses his For You page as a scrolling like this was because he's desperate. What is he thinking? Is there anyone working on his team?
It literally, I cannot believe that part of that video made it up at any point in time on YouTube. But it's just like, it is so pitiful. It is like, even if we are to take this at face value, which I personally don't, I think that, like, it's not that you're desperate for love, because what you're doing does not constitute love. It is like, it is ease of access. It is power imbalance.
Yes.
It is a power imbalance. Like, and this goes for anyone who is at the level of fame that James Charles had, going after people, even if they were legal adults, which some of them were. Like, some of them were actually, like, above the age of 18, but had expressed, like, concerns about the way that James had, like, misused his power in those relationships. Or they weren't even relationships. It was just, like, back and forths. But it was, like, there was validity to that argument because James did have so much more power. And you could see when the Snapchat conversations would get leaked, you could see James weaponizing that, because he would be like, you need to delete that, you need to do this, you need to do that. And, like, throughout his career,
it was always on his terms.
Yes. And throughout his public career, James has always leveraged his power against people who have less power, or who he thinks has less power than he does. So that was really concerning to me. And the other thing that struck me about the video that he made and deleted is he acknowledges messaging people under the age of 18, but he says that those people lied to him about their ages. And one of those boys I was speaking to at the time over direct messages, and that boy denied lying about his age. He said, like, I never lied to James about my age, and he hasn't been able to prove that I lied about my age. And in fact, he was like, James was messaging me on Instagram, and my age was in my bio. So it's like, James did not provide evidence that these boys were maliciously trying to, like, trap him, but he flipped it on them and made them the villain. And I found that to be, like, very disturbing as well.
Now, keep in mind, in the video, James says, I can't quote exactly, but he's like, speak about James Charles and you'll get a viral TikTok. So there was a level of arrogance, even in a video where he's admitting that he messaged underage people. So this was the situation that James never came back from. Like, he could gain momentum again, he could whatever, but this is, when people think about James Charles, this is really the moment that, like, comes to mind. Like, this is when everyone knew. The consequences, if you will, I've listed some here. Morphe dropped their partnership, which was fucking huge, considering that Morphe was what they were because of James Charles.
It ultimately did Morphe in as well.
The same way of them dropping Shane and Jeffrey. They're bankrupt now, or whatever the fuck they are. And by the way, we have James Charles on TikTok being like, Morphe owe me $3 million, but they filed for bankruptcy. So something also to note. Now, YouTube ended up demonetizing his YouTube channel temporarily as well, which was huge. And mainstream outlets like Business Insider, the New York Times, were covering him as basically a disgraced influencer. And there was, there was celebrity backlash as well, and, like, YouTuber backlash. Ethan Klein and Trisha Paytas were on frenemies, dragging him relentlessly. And then ultimately, Ethan Klein started attacking him as well, because Sisters Apparel did a very similar Teddy Fresh design as well, but we don't need, who cares about Teddy Fresh? Taddy did a comeback video in the following years where she kind of vaguely referenced James, but said that, like, they're good again, which was an interesting model. And then we just kind of have from 2021 until now this continuing to resurface. So we move into 2022 to present day, and this is kind of like James not being able to, like, get everyone on site again. Like, so we have kind of the failed comeback attempts. So we had him really rebranding to a lifestyle influencer because of TikTok, and, you know, more so about him rather than makeup. But he did start to kind of slowly return to YouTube. However, the first couple videos were flooded with people calling him, like, predator, groomer, and, like, this was attached to him. And I think this was really the moment when, like, James Charles jail memes are now like flooding the internet, like something he'll never come back from. he also was like canceling events as well around this time, and his credibility in the beauty. So I wrote this down. His credibility in the beauty industry is gone. However, he's still big on TikTok, considering it's such a fast-moving platform. Like,
Yes.
what do you think that is? Like, YouTube don't want him, technically, like the community don't want him, but TikTok are fine with it. Do you think it has to do with the fact that he did get such a young audience, or like, I don't know?
I do think it has to do with having a young audience. Also, something really interesting that, like, at an Adam McIntyre meet and greet a few years ago.
Me?
In New York, at a Muckers meet and greet a few years ago, I was there and I was talking to this one Mucker who told me that she is Spanish speaking and her family is Spanish speaking.
Yeah.
And she was like, in the Spanish speaking community, James Charles has had huge success in recent years. And people who are native Spanish speakers who don't speak English or who just are more immersed in like their own culture don't necessarily even know about all the controversies.
Whoa, that's an interesting point.
Yeah, I mean, it's not, I would have to fact check this, but it's like, I doubt that there was as much coverage of the James Charles controversies in Spanish publications versus like English speaking publications, and a lot of the online drama was in English versus Spanish. But you can absolutely track how James over the past few years has leaned on this demographic heavily. He has made videos in Spanish that have been very successful.
Oh my God, yes.
He has gone to Brazil, I believe, and like taken pictures with like huge celebrities, and those pictures on Instagram, like those posts have done tremendously well.
Anita
for
and
him.
stuff, if I'm not mistaken.
I think so, yes. And like James has absolutely leaned into that. So that is really interesting to me. And I think like with TikTok, it is a much easier format to succeed in than YouTube. Like, literally, I have had TikToks that have gone, like, vaguely viral, like hundreds of thousands of views. And they're, like, super easy to make and, like, super easy to reach a new audience. Yeah. So I think TikTok, like, it makes sense to me that a lot of these canceled influencers have, like, been able to maintain and grow followings on TikTok because of that. I think the problem is TikTok can give you this huge, sudden online platform, but it doesn't oftentimes result in lasting legacy.
Longevity, yeah.
Yeah. And I think that you see that with James so clearly because he still has a lot of the numbers behind him, but he no longer by any means has like the legacy or the longevity or just like the reputation that he once had.
I think that's true as well. Like if you're able to, like James is doing, get TikToks daily that have like 1 million views. If that was YouTube, you would have a loyal fan base. But I think that James's audience, like TikTok audiences, are more casual. Now, the final thing with James is that in 2023, he decided to launch his makeup line, Painted. Now, first of all, why the fuck did James launch his makeup in 2023 and not any other year? Is there anyone on that goddamn team? Like, I don't know if there was a deal with Morphe, like an exclusivity or whatever, but I think that that is one of the biggest oversights that I've ever seen in the beauty community, that James, after all of the scandals, is then launching the fucking makeup line in its entirety. What the fuck is up with that?
It is really bonkers. And it's like, for anyone releasing makeup right now, like the industry, it has recovered slightly from, 2020 era, because in 2020 makeup as an industry took a huge hit because people were not going outside, they were not going to parties, they were not going to work, so makeup took a huge hit. Skincare rose in its place, and now you see with a lot of like makeup brands that are doing really well, like even like I think about Rare Beauty, I think about Hailey Bieber's Rhode. First of all, they're much bigger celebrities than the YouTubers who at one point were dominating the field, and a lot of their products are more of a like subtle look versus what James Charles is known for. James Charles is known for like extreme artistry, and Painted obviously hinges on that. So it's like the market has really moved on from a lot of that. There's still an audience for it, but back in the heyday of 2016 to 2019, you would go to the mall. Every single one of us was baking our foundation. I remember like
you speak for yourself, girl. You speak for yourself.
Well, I think particularly like I lived in Ohio at this time. Like the Midwest is a big target demographic for this culture.
Yeah.
So it's like I saw this and I still see it sometimes, but like I would see this all the time, and I personally bought more makeup during those years than I've bought at any other point in my life.
I know you looked crazy as fuck.
I looked insane.
Oh, I've seen the photos, actually. You did look crazy as fuck.
I did. I wasn't horrible at makeup, but I definitely would do my brows really blocky. I would do the eyeshadow. The eyeliner was not good. It was way too chunky. It was and then it's like, why are you wearing lime green eyeshadow to go to like Trader Joe's? Like, that was a bad period for all of us.
It's like, it is so funny, like, in the grand scheme of things, like, why are you doing a full beat to literally go to, like, the Cheesecake Factory?
Why? Like, literally, the thing that gets me is, like, the baking and the contouring, and this makeup style is literally descended from drag makeup. This is literally what they would do on RuPaul's Drag Race, and I'm getting in my bedroom before I go to geometry class. Like, I've got my contour sticks. Like, why were we doing that? It's so ridiculous.
You raise a good point. If James, because by the way, the painted makeup line that he has is colorful.
Yeah,
it's colorful AF. It literally is supposed to be about like an artist board of paints and having all the colors. But you make a great point. If this had came out when he did the Morphe palette, it would probably be one of the biggest makeup brands, and it probably would be to this day, even with all the controversies, because he would have been able to pivot to this more like skincare and like lighter products, if you will. Mm-hmm. But if James was to have came out with his makeup line in 2023 like he did, and it was like lighter makeup and like the no makeup look, it wouldn't make sense. Whereas, like you're saying, the makeup brands that nowadays are doing well really came from the time when makeup wasn't doing well anymore, like 2020 on, but there was a smart method behind it. Selena's Rare Beauty is like the perfect one to me. Selena really relied, like you said, on the fact that people did not want to wear a lot of makeup anymore and just wanted like the bare minimum, which was the entire selling point. So when you have everyone now really doing like more subtle makeup versus James Charles is trying to sell you a full beat, like it doesn't really... Like, people look at the James Charles makeup and go, that really reminds me of, like, 2016, you know what I mean? Yeah. But there was one thing that really set Painted up for failure, and I remember making videos on it. James was in the process of creating Painted and would take to TikTok every day, and people called it a smart business decision, where he would be like, hey, guys, I'm coming out with my makeup brand. There's so many makeup brands. What can we do that will make us stand out? And he would literally do this with, like, products. He would be like, would you prefer if a product look like this? Or give us some ideas. And people were like, this is so innovative. But I and a majority of people were saying this is lazy. And you're literally getting your audience at large to give you ideas that you should be paying people for. And you're taking the cheap route. And from the get-go, it showed that James Charles had no direction with his makeup brand, which ultimately as well is, I'm sure it does pretty well, but why... it was not what it probably was intended to be. You know what I mean? So yeah, I just want to, my final thing for us to talk about is 2024 until this last year. James Charles's reputation now. So he's still posting regularly. However, I would say that James's name is probably permanently tied to like grooming or like underage scandals or just being problematic in general. I would say as well that a lot of companies really don't necessarily work with him anymore. He will still be at things, but like he's not really ever going to be the spokesperson again, I wouldn't say. Yeah. There's always public backlash when something happens where he's trending. He still has a fan base, I would say a core fan base, but he's kind of seen as someone to a mainstream audience that is kind of like, we don't want to touch that the same way. Like if he ever collaborates with a celebrity now, that celebrity will probably have to apologize for it. Right. And which is funny because that does happen now, but it reminds me of, remember Kim Kardashian was like, guys, and she's getting like her contour on like her boobs and she's like, guys, leave James alone. And then a day later, she's like, guys, I'm so sorry. I don't like James.
I do remember that. I remember like when he also embedded himself into the Kardashians, and that was so good for his channel. But I'll never forget.
It was crazy that they took him under his wing.
They did. And I remember the video that he shot with Kylie Jenner where he did her Halloween makeup, but then he wasn't recording. Do you remember that?
Oh my God, yes.
I mean, he collabed with Kylie, and then I can only imagine, like, the panic and fear, and just, like, I would probably honestly throw up if I was, like, filming a video with, like, Kylie Jenner, and I had not turned the fucking camera on. But she very graciously sat down and filmed the entire thing with him again. I also think at that point in time, that was also his peak, so it's, like, it was good for the Kardashians to be filming with him, which is so far away from where we are right now.
That was King Kylie. That was King Kylie.
It was wild.
Okay, so some final questions for you. I don't have a lot because I think we've covered a lot here. So with James, do you think that James will be able to fully ever recover the way that the public do see him? Or do you think that he kind of just will be at where he's at now for like kind of ever?
I think that James, in order to reestablish himself at like a higher level, needs to do some sort of massive rebrand. Mm-hmm. And it honestly surprises me that he hasn't tried to do this. Instead, the way that he's directed his career is just like basically clinging on to whatever the most viral trend is. Yeah. Because then it doesn't matter, like, his persona, his personality. That doesn't matter as much as just, like, the virality of whatever he's doing. A great example of this is he's recently done multiple videos in Orlando, taste testing food at, like, Epcot, drinking around
Coca-Cola,
hello. He did an Epic Universe taste test. I was just like, it is just staggering to me that he is doing this type of content. But, like, even within that content, this stuff, people are still making fun of him because they still view him as the exact same James Charles that he has always been. He needs to do some sort of huge rebrand if he wants to be successful again. And frankly, I do not even think that he necessarily should be as successful as he once was, because it's like, we don't know if he's actually grown, changed, taken accountability. And I doubt that he has ever truly, like, mitigated the harm that was, like, caused to some of those boys who I spoke to. Like, whenever I look at James Charles, I will think back to those conversations.
Well, also, one thing that really stands out to me when you bring up the Orlando is a recent thing, which was James was, you know, recorded filming a video, and it was him being like, Coca-Cola, hello, and it was going viral with people making fun of him. And James made a video about people making fun of him, and he was like, what you guys don't understand is I make so much money the more you make fun of me. Continue making fun of me. And there's just this level of, like, ugh, that comes across as really desperate. Okay, I do have a couple more questions for you that we can rapid fire. Do you think that James was ever respected in the beauty community, or do you think it was just all hype and sales?
I think he was respected by some, but I think he made a ton of enemies, like, along the whole way.
James's No More Lies saved him because of receipts and being able to combat the narrative. Why do you think that that was the only time that that worked for him?
I truly believe in that scenario, like, Jeffree Star, I think, was the weakest link. Jeffree Star's behavior was so messy and so over the top. The things he was saying about James was so extreme. Like, he tweeted at James's brother, who was, like, I think just a young teenager at the time. Like, Jeffree was the final nail in that coffin.
Okay, 2 final questions. The second last is, do you think that James is an example of cancel culture working or cancel culture not working?
Oh, that's such a good question. I think that James is just a perfect example of the nuances of cancel culture in general, which is that, like, it's never a complete clean break. People who get really canceled make their comebacks. People like James Charles, who, like, even though his reputation will forever be associated with that, I look at men who were also called out in the Me Too movement, who we think of as, like, canceled, and they still are able to make they're still able to live very privileged lives. They're still able to perform to audiences. They're still able to tour. They're still able to, like, make things. So I think that I put James in that category where it's like his reputation, I truly believe, will never escape 2019 or 2021, but he's continued to, like, be able to profit and to be able to, like, maintain a career, and I imagine that he will be able to do that for a long time.
Well, my thing I've always said is that I don't believe that cancel culture actually is a thing. I think it's something that's used as a defense. I believe that someone is only canceled if they choose to walk away. And because James will continue posting, there will always be an audience there. Okay, final question. In 10 years, what do you think will be the thing that James is remembered for? Do you think he'll be remembered as a makeup pioneer, the first male cover girl, fighting with Ariana Grande, his show Instant Influencer, the makeup success, his Morphe palette, Painted, the scandals? What do you think?
I think if I had to write like a one sentence description of James Charles, like that I think will stand the test of time, I think he will be remembered as a like pioneering male beauty guru, like a pioneering male beauty influencer who was also like equally, if not greater, known for his controversies.
Beautiful. Beautiful. And with that, we have done our second deep dive. I said to Kat before we started filming, I was like, I wonder how this one's going to go because there's probably significantly less with James and Jeffree. Actually, that's not true. I would say the ranges of severity with a bunch of James's things are different than Jeffree's, and then we have the more serious ones. I appreciate you coming on again. And again, where can people find you, and where can they go?
Well, thank you so much for having me. This was so fun. I'm at spitfirenews.com and then at Tenbarge on Blue Sky and Instagram.
And all of it will be correctly linked below. That was my fault. And again, Kat, I appreciate you coming on. Guys, if you have anyone that you want us to make one of these videos on, please let us know because we can yap and we love talking about internet stuff. So we'll see you all in the next one. Appreciate you being here. All of Kat's links are down below, and goodbye.